Hey, everybody, welcome back to Prince's Friend, exploring music through Prince. And we are graced for a second time with the presence of the Neal Karlen. Thank you so much for being back on the show, Neal.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I had so much fun last time, and I was like a surprise guest, like Johnny, like I marking my age, Johnny Carson, Bob Hope would walk out unannounced. But so I didn't know I was going to be on your show, and I hadn't slept for 36 hours, and I was there with my beautiful girlfriend, Michelle Strites, Casper Strites. It's one of those things where you know where you go and you just know you're not going to have to be on.
Yeah.
Not like you're on, but you just like, okay, I'll go, and I'm just not going to talk. And like suddenly we started talking, and it's just that I didn't pass out, and you would have had a situation on your hands.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would have been like, wow, this is
Isn't it like 10
the
years
first
ago?
time I've ever had a guest pass out on my show.
We were next. It's like another era. We were sitting next to each other,
Yeah.
And George Floyd hadn't happened yet, and it was another planet. I mean, another existence.
It really was. It really was. But you have a brand new book out.
I have
it's going to be out.
Yes, it's October 6th, and it's about Prince. And I wrote 3 cover stories. See, it doesn't, like, who goes around going, oh, it's so un-Minnesota. Unlike, so far, it's been like it's going to be excerpted in Rolling Stone, and it's going to be on Alan Light's show, and there's a lot of good. I can't say something because they're like, if I say them, they won't happen. And you know how things always fall. It's like it's a for sure, it's a not for sure.
Well, and what was the final title? It was formerly.
It was
because I heard a bunch of different titles.
There was the one that was like literally appeared on Amazon, and it was thought up by the. I loved it. Was formerly known as
and
the business staff, like for the first, just rebelled. They hated it, and like when they took it out to booksellers, they hated it. I mean, they like demanded. So like it was funny. I had just written the obituary of my father. This was just like a year ago, and in it I put this thing called life. So that it's called this thing. Called Life, Prince's Odysseys, on and off the record. And that's the little funny, because it's, I interviewed him on the record several times for a bunch of Rolling Stones. And, but it was off the record. It was the guy, it's like, why do we need another Prince book? When I go through it, it's like, okay, we've got, everything's been covered and covered well, pretty, even when it's done badly, someone else has done it well, but what was missing, I thought at least, was the guy I knew. And it wasn't like, oh, this guy was 180 degrees, he, it's not one of those, stories. But in everything I read, and I spent the first year, working on this, reading every single word that ever been written about him, except my own words about him. And I couldn't listen to the tapes because it was too painful. I mean, they're putting in the audiobook 25 minutes of our conversations just so you can hear him on different topics. And it's really fun just to hear him talking as like not doing a number, I still don't know why, like, he trusted me to do it, but I wasn't on his, one thing that helped was I wasn't on his payroll and I wasn't writing about him,
Right.
Like on purpose, like I'm done. I can't, that's all Prince's power was such back then that became what you were. And it was like, there are no scoops in rock and roll, but him talking actually was. At the time he was that big, and
I feel like that. I feel like that happens with anybody who kind of is in Prince's atmosphere, his stratosphere, his universe. There's some amazingly talented people who like Prince like discover and like gives them a spotlight, and then if they leave his camp for any reason, like for some reason they're just, they don't pop up anymore.
No, it's like he said, he once said, I can make anybody famous for 15 minutes, but I can't make them famous forever. And they never forgive me. I mean, that's it. I mean, he can pluck you out and do your album and
Yeah.
write all the songs, but you gotta have it. But I liked who he picked too. I mean, some were not, I said Mavis Staples. I mean, they weren't discoveries, but they were discoveries kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
he paid honor to his elders, which I liked,
Yeah. And in Mavis's case, it was more of, he did kind of make her in the pop area, because
Yeah.
she had, she conquered gospel, but through Prince, she was able to kind of cross over.
Right. And she had crossed over like in the 60s with a few things on Stack, I'll Take You There and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
And George Clinton, he really was generous in his praise of these people as forerunner, which is good because a lot of people, Bob Dylan is famously ungenerous to other musicians, except Prince. He really was into
really?
Prince. Yeah, the quotes I saw from him and the things he said when he had his radio show. So that was good. This was just it was like both an honor and like it was like the hardest thing I ever did in my life. And I hope I didn't do it badly. I don't know. I just really finished writing. And
I will say, as somebody who has read half of the book before we got here, I think it's very good. It's very detailed, which obviously is helped by the copious amounts of notes and recordings that you have. I guess what is it that you're hoping to, because you're like, you feel like the guy isn't out there, but who is the guy that you're trying to kind of portray Prince at? Like, who was Prince in this book?
He really had 16 different personas, and I don't know if I knew 7 or 12 so I tried to figure out I knew what I saw in front of me and him say to me, he would say different things to different people. He would create his own, Rashomon, where there's one event and 8 people give their own versions of it. He would take one event and give 8 versions of his own version.
Yeah, right.
What drove me to keep doing it was, book after book came out and so many were good, but so many just the facts were wrong, or this isn't how he talked. I think I know I didn't know them all, but I learned different ones. He had different personas, and in Minneapolis he could hide out. And I make this big pro wrestling analogy. It's called kayfabe, where you just act the role, and you would act the role. And sometimes it was the pimp, and sometimes it was the beaten child, and sometimes it was the hard-nosed businessman. He had different, for the first year of the book, I could not listen to tapes of him. The first ones, which were, I was 25 and he was 26, they were so painful because the ghosts were not just of his ghosts, but my ghosts. I remember that's half a lifetime ago, And, the last year of the book, I had trouble. I had transcripts, so it wasn't like I couldn't write the book. I just couldn't hear the actual voices. It's like, you want to say, don't, in 2 weeks, don't decide to do that.
It's interesting because I had just, in preparation for this, I went and I read some previous interviews and stuff that you had done. And there was an interview that you did where you were like, I have these tapes and I have all this stuff and I may one day write a book about Prince, but like not now. Like I wouldn't do it right now.
Yeah. And I so tried to get away from that. I never gave an interview until the very end, like a month before he died, on purpose, because there was a reason which I describe in the book. So I wanted to get away from that because I wanted to run away to other circuses. Yeah. And you get so typecast in everything, and I just didn't want that. I didn't want to be like anybody's guy. Not like I'm John Wayne and I got to be I was the only guy he talked to for magazines, like from before Purple Rain to like when he changed his name. But I worked on rock operas with him in his last will and liner notes, which he hated. When he liked something, you got paid right away. When he didn't like something, you did not get paid. He'd never tell you that he liked that. Just your check would clear.
Yeah.
But he was a good guy, and I think that's been lost a lot. And we so needed him. I mean, I don't mean to turn this into a George Floyd-a-thon,
Yeah.
but I think he would have provided the soundtrack to what happened after George Floyd. I mean, he was going to Baltimore to,
Yeah.
you know, or do his own concert for Freddie
Yeah.
Gray.
Mhm.
And that song he did, Baltimore. I mean, for the first, I used to say I was glad Prince couldn't come back to life, because if he saw what was being done in his name
Yeah.
and on his behalf, he would die again. But when George Floyd died, I thought, God, we need him now more than ever.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. I also feel like, if he was still alive, the last 4 years would have been filled with that music. Like it wouldn't have been, George Floyd is when he would have come out with another thing.
No,
He would have been
no. I mean,
making it
he would
this
have been.
whole time.
He
Yeah,
wrote Donald Trump Black Version in 1990.
exactly.
I mean, he got that 26 years before the. I mean, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
when he died, the only tweet that Barack Obama and Trump like agreed on ever was like, Prince was great, Prince was great. And Barack made it sort of his soundtrack for like his victory lap that last year, when it looked like, can we survive another? I don't know. Anyway, that's another.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other maybe we're being
Don't you wish
far
you
off
had
track here.
Prince's like take on. I mean, he would have done it in like 36 hours. He wrote Baltimore, which is a great song, I think, really fast, and released it to Tidal really fast. I mean,
Yeah.
there is just so much we don't know that it's going to be released and released and released. And it's pretty, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff in there,
Yeah.
Do you think there's too much? I mean, do you go, wait a minute, because it seems like there is, like, if you're going to get the 6 album complete, then you get 3 months later, the 9,
That's a good question. I feel like I don't think that there's too much. I think
Right.
that I do feel though that Prince was selective in what he did choose to release.
Right.
So because there are songs that are coming out that are complete songs
Right.
that for some reason never found their way onto an album. And you have to think there might have been a reason for that. At the same time, I think the more Prince music, the better. That's my own personal.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just want his later music to start coming out, which hopefully will happen, going into 2021, which is when Sony starts taking over things. And
right. And you started liking him in 1990.
90.
So that's like, 6 years post Purple Rain.
Right.
How did you look back as a new fan on, is like the old, is back in the day, or, he was in another incarnation?
No, it's weird, and you're turning the tables on me, sir. I know you're a professional interviewer, but here's
sorry, what is it? Shut up.
It's cool. But what I did though was I listened to Graffiti Bridge and I loved it. And my mom said, that's the same guy who did Purple Rain. So I listened to a little bit of Purple Rain and I was just like, those two sounds couldn't be more different.
Right.
So I said, how about this? I went and I bought his very first album and I was just like, let me just listen to him in order so I understand how he got to that.
Right.
And by doing that, I fell in love with his music and have listened to him ever since.
There's so much nostalgia behind the scenes of what feels new to you, like Graffiti Bridge. They rebuilt what the Twin City Minneapolis was like when in the jazz in the 50s, where they had like 7 jazz clubs that were really great. And there were some great Oscar Pettiford was from here, but John Nelson was also from here. And where he ended up playing was including my great uncle Augie's strip joint. That is what on Hennepin Avenue. Yeah. That was another connection between Prince and me, was that, when they talk about, like, I mean, his father would talk about playing there were 3 strip joints in downtown Minneapolis. And that's baloney, that story that Prince seeing his father in gold, it wasn't the Prince Rogers trio. In the book, they have a really fun picture of the Prince Rogers trio. And it says, like, on the drum, Prince Rogers trio, and there are 4 of them, it's perfect, it's like, and, but it's a terrible thing when a father is jealous of his son.
Yeah,
And
that was, I got through that chapter. There was 2 chapters of
yeah, he
basically
go
kind of
back and forth
son.
between idolizing his father, wanting to be like him, and just hating him.
Yeah.
They, they'd have a fight, and it went on his whole life. When he, it turned out that he was by his father's side. I mean, Michelle found out that, in the hospice, and yet as soon as he was dead, he like knocked down the house.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
which is his way. With my tales, the marriage got annulled. The divorce wasn't good enough. It had to have never happened.
Yeah, it's that seemed to be his way of kind of dealing as something that you noticed that you mentioned in the book, is that he was not a nostalgic person.
No,
So
and he would do that with friends, and that would, there, a lot of the people. First of all, if anyone comes on your show and says, "All right, let me tell you about Prince," Prince was like the
mhm.
line. I don't care who they are, because he was so many different people at so many different. You know what I mean? That anyone who claims they knew it all, and people are sort of embarrassed. People who really knew him, because I'll go like, God, I only knew like 15%. And they were like,
Yeah.
oh, phew. Everyone thinks we were like his best friend. He wouldn't let. We talked about very heavy things, but there were areas of his life that you just didn't go into.
Yeah.
And I spent every weekend when I flew in from New York for Rolling Stone. I mean, what could be more obnoxious than a 25-year-old Rolling Stone writer from New York? And it turned out I grew up in Minneapolis, and every weekend I spent 2 blocks from where Prince lived at my grandparents' house on Oliver and Plymouth. I have on tape the moment when he realizes we're both from Minneapolis, because for 2 days he just checked me out from afar.
Oh, okay.
Again, like they were then at the warehouse. It was before Paisley Park, and he was rehearsing like The Family and Maserati and all that. And he would do this with other reporters later. He checked them out for a couple of days, and then the 3rd day is when he gave me my like human being tryout. And he was we were driving in his neighborhood to pick up his father for his birthday party. And he said, now there's a big difference between North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis. And I said, I know, my grandparents live right there. and I said, and over there is Worth Park. And I explained to him how that in the old days when the mob ruled Minneapolis, it was the favored dumping ground of bodies was Worth Park. Okay. And they never solved them. They were, so there's once where like the Minneapolis police, the guy died like 10 yards inside the Minneapolis border. So they pushed him over to Golden Valley the next day. But I said, like, God, I used to toboggan down that hill. And he said, so did I. I mean, and it was so weird. My grandparents lived next door to a Dairy Queen. Yeah. And that's where the kids would gather. I was the only white kid. In fact, my nickname was Casper. At first, I was going to wear a Casper t-shirt on. I didn't. Good luck. I do. Yeah, Brad, do you remember deep dive? But I knew how to do ball handling tricks. And Andre Simone was good. He said, that's why Prince would have been. Now, I didn't remember any of this. This is not me saying. Prince said this. Oh, right. You were that white kid who could spin the basketball. That's why we didn't, and my grandfather supplied the whole neighborhood with wine. But it's weird looking at my Uncle Augie's, well, he's dead, and seeing Jay Nelson, Yeah. Is there a feeling in California that the apocalypse is coming? The apocalypse is big in Prince imagery. He always, I remember when Londell McMillan was quoted as saying he didn't leave a will because he never thought he'd die. He never talked about death. And it's like, my first thought was, are you crazy? That's all he ever talked about was dying from age 25. And then I realized, I don't know what he talks to about
other people. Yeah. Probably does not talk to his lawyer about dying.
Yeah. So it's like, at first it's like I'm the schmuck, because I'm like assuming what other people know. And a lot of people hadn't talked to him in 40 years. And there's a line in the movie, The Big Chill. It's like from before your time, it's like a reunion of old college buddies and men and women. And Kevin Kline says that they get into an argument with some people. And he said, and I would stop we've known each other too long, to get into these fights. And William Hurt said, wrong. We knew each other for a short time, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like when you're in college. And there are a lot of people who knew Prince for a short time, a long time ago. And they're sort of, it's not that they're not owning up to it, it's that they're projecting an entire life based on that. And he loved the psychology of lying and mistruths, and he liked telling journalists stuff, like lying. I'm sorry. I mean, I had a whole chapter on how he'd studied lying. He loved police interrogation techniques,
What I found was actually pretty interesting in your book would be where it almost seemed like he was so, from your view, he seemed like he was really good at lying and telling different stories to different people. But around you, he seemed like he was being pretty truthful, and then would go, but hey, Neal, you can't write about that.
Yeah, he only did that once, and it was about his father beating him. And I didn't, but I thought I was pointing all these fingers because I had, he'd been saying, my father did do this, my father did. It's like, what is missing from this? And that's the only time. I mean, he wasn't this like control freak, like, don't say that. No, I didn't say that. I just saw Dwayne Tudall's next book that's coming out.
Yeah,
he had a section about Susanna Melvoin, and just going, it was a fun time for him. He had a fun time with that interview, and he never, I got people turning things off all the time, and he never went off the record. He was goofy. He was very smart. He came up with that policy as a joke, about not letting people take notes or record, and he could be a rascal, but he could also let himself. What he said after his sales went up 44,000% the week after he died. He occupied 4 of the top 10 slots. And anyone who knew him knew what he would say, that his dying, it was a good career move, which of course was a line they used when Elvis died. And it's what Prince would have said if he would have seen what had happened to him. He was pretty unsentimental too. Yeah. But when he got nostalgic, he got very nostalgic. And you don't know if he, when he talked about going to see the Cassius Clay Liston fight when he was still Cassius Clay, I was never sure if he was like bullshitting or not. I mean, he seemed to believe it. The first thing was, it was so weird because it's not like I have this magic potion and like, oh, but I am. You will tell, but they have fact checkers at Rolling Stone, and they were checking stuff. But he fed me of the mistakes I point out in the book right away. That like my very first sentence I wrote about Prince, I was wrong.
Yeah,
so I have nothing. When I'm pointing fingers, I should point fingers at me, because, and he told me bullshit, about what his mother, half Indian, and, I mean, but I got good at sort of telling when he was going off there. And there's some unfortunate casualties along the way, like Kim Berry, his hairdresser, who was with him for 30 years. And I always, like the best thing I read the week he died was Kim Berry in like American Beautician talking to someone about it was the best. Yeah. It sounded like him. You could tell she knew him, and then her book came out, and he had told her this story, cockamamie story about his mother stealing from his piggy bank to buy drugs. And that's, and that's why he did this and behaved this way towards women. And he told early interviewers that she left hardcore pornography around. Maddie Shaw was the most dignified, stable, non-drug. She was a social worker who specialized in addiction issues in the Minnesota school system. I mean, and she was his closest confidant, and she just loved him, He said that. Oh, I could never fact check stuff with her because she'd say, what did he say? Whatever he said's true.
Whatever he said is true, right? Well, I mean, actually getting to that, did you get a chance to read Prince's memoir, the one
yes,
that he did with Dan Piepenburg?
Piepenburg, yeah. He wrote.
What did you think of he didn't write a lot, but what did you think of this?
I thought it was a good, presentation. I mean, it was supposed to sort of be a sleazy project almost. Random House gave Prince $2.5 million right before he died. He had 29 pages handwritten out when he died.
Yeah.
And Random House wanted their $2.5 million back. And Paisley Park didn't want to give them their $2.5 million back. So what they had to do was they threw open the gates to all his lyrics, all his stuff. And I'm not putting this out because I thought it was fascinating to see all that. And I thought Dan did a smart thing. Dan had never written a book before. He wanted a list of writers under 30 who'd never written a book before. And he's always talking about how he was going to bullshit his, I'm sorry, I'm using foul languages because I won't be able to anymore. And I thought he wrote a really good essay. And you could also tell he'd only talked to him 4 or 5 times because he didn't have I don't want to put him down. And in the book, I made a point of really saying this is a valuable addition to the Prince literature. And I think it is. And the reason I think it was great, for my cause, it wasn't like, your book is doomed. It still didn't show the guy. There's room enough for everybody under the Prince tent. Everyone can have, there are academic journals, there are, discographies, biographies, pathographies.
I think largely from everything that I've gathered from everybody that I've spoken to, all of the different fan communities that are kind of out there.
And you've talked to everybody. I mean,
everybody has like who Prince was to them. And that also spans time.
Right.
Like if you read Morris Day's memoir, it's very much of like, he was my brother, but he was also one of my biggest rivals and a douchebag. And sometimes I loved him and sometimes I hated him, but if you were to talk to Shelby J, who worked with him in his later years, to her, he's like this amazing mentor, who really took her under his wing and really like showed her what music could be. And that's the same dude, but there's also lots of time in between there as well.
Yeah. It's, there's a great picture in my book. It's a fabulous one. No, but that Andre Simone let me for the book, and it's of Grand Central, Prince and Andre's first band, and Morris Day is in it too. And it's so funny to see Morris at 15 wearing the shins, but he was like an errand boy, Lisa Coleman boy, Prince. I mean, one of the things I get into in the book was how Prince invented a character named Morris Day and had Morris Day play him. I mean,
right.
Prince had been a freckle face, and he'd always wanted to be out front. But I remember Prince said, "But when you're selling shoes, you wouldn't think of Darren asking for such." So Prince, tortured. He would poor Morris, but he loved that Morris stole Purple Rain. He thought that was great, and yet at the same time there was this. He fired him from. He said the only band he was ever truly afraid of was The Time. And he said he said he wasn't into Bruce Springsteen music. They were friends, Bruce Springsteen and Prince. And he said, although Prince always gave him a little knock, but he would say Springsteen's audience was the only audience he couldn't steal. I thought that was interesting because he so looked at like he would not just play well, he would steal your audience and steal your girlfriend and steal your grandma, and steal your silverware. He would destroy you. That was part of his ethos. Part of what, I talk about, it does break my heart when I think of it's a heartbreaking childhood. He was fragmented, but also part of that is what drove him, and he would, and there's one part of the tape that sends chills through my spine. I sent people where he talks about, this is right after Purple Rain, how he'd get hurt all the time on the Purple Rain tour. And when you read stuff now, it says that's where he started using opioids, and he said he heard this inner voice that was telling him, "You can't stop. I'll tell you when you can stop. You can't." Mm-hmm. And it was like the demon of genius. You know what I mean? It's like he would always talk about he couldn't stop his head from just bouncing, and it's the torture of genius. I'm sure of it. I haven't met many geniuses, but the geniuses I've known several tortured geniuses.
That's actually, I think that's what creates a genius. Mm-hmm. I was actually just discussing this with a friend of mine, and I was telling him, I'm like, Prince is a wonderful, amazing story of like what it is to be a true artist, but it ended tragically. And it's, same with like MJ, it's just like this, boy plucked from, Detroit and like made into a superstar, and how that slowly just led him to destroy himself. I feel like everything is very different nowadays, to the point where not only is there just more progressive parenting happening, not only is it just social media has taken over everything, so you don't have these isolated, super just lonely geniuses just existing in a vacuum anymore. Nowadays, to be a star, you have to engage now. Like you can't be Prince nowadays. There will never be another Prince, because the circumstances.
How would he have engaged now? I wonder. I mean, his father wouldn't let him use the piano, you know? I mean,
it's just kind of, I think about that sometimes, and I think of like it was an amazing time to be in the world when Prince was here, but also we will never see another Prince, just because the world, I don't think, would allow another Prince to happen.
no. And I don't think another Prince could take it. I mean, when I think back of his energy, and I'm not this like, oh, Prince was God.
Yeah.
It's astonishing he lasted that long. I thought he was. We had a bet, and it was fact checked by GQ, so it's true. What would happen if we die? Whoever died first?
Yeah.
And I was sure I would go first. I'm just like I've been falling apart since I was 7, And I thought he'd be 93, be like Muddy Waters, or
yeah,
he was playing at 93, playing great, and the deal was, if I went first, which I sure would have, he would play for an hour at my high school in Minneapolis after lunch. I knew he'd play for 3 hours and the kids wouldn't have to go back to school. So I thought I would live on, and if he went first, I had to write one small article in the hometown paper, which I did, and it was the hardest story I've ever written. I mean, it was 1,200 words. It was, and I hadn't typed the word Prince for publication in 26 years to get away from that world. And it was like, dun, 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 your life is going to change.
I guess that's my next question is like, now with you releasing this book, you kind of are opening that can of worms again.
I know. And I was able to avoid it for like 3 years, and I just kept a very low profile. And the thing that got me through was, I know this sounds pompous. I know this sounds like I would throw something at the TV or something, or the computer. But it took me so long, as I said, like over 3 decades, to realize, God, I take friendship very seriously. I don't, we were friends. It took me like 35 years, and I felt like I had to do like justice to a friend. You know how you just have to do like, because things just sucked in my life while things were going on, and it became this like labor of love. It was like torture, but I had to do right by him, because I didn't think he wanted to escape from history, and I wasn't going to let him. He wanted to be like Robert Johnson, the greatest Delta blues man ever.
Yeah.
They don't know 15 facts about him, and he said in 2004, the greatest thing that happened to him was not getting elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which he was, not having the highest touring gross in the world, which he did, but it was disappearing from history, because he said the record is so muddied now.
Yeah.
No one will ever know the difference. And half of them were stuff he planted in the papers, or he told reporters, and
that's why it's so weird, existing in the Prince community. There's so many, like, a lot of the time I take anybody that I speak to, I take whatever they're saying, I take at face value. That's probably true. Whatever you're saying, it's true probably to an extent. I'm not the person who's going to be like, well, no, that's not what I heard. It's this, not that. It's like, especially knowing again that Prince would he muddied the waters himself. Like,
he did
his own creation.
And he did it. He said he didn't want people focusing on the fact that he came from a broken family. And you know what? People wouldn't have it was the north side of Minneapolis. Minneapolis was 50% broken homes. It was like, his was a truly broken home, and he was a broken person. And I don't say that like
Yeah.
judgmentally. It broke your, because he was a good guy, and
Yeah.
it just came out in weird ways. And I'm glad I wasn't on his payroll, because I know there are people who will say he was the biggest. I mean, I saw that he had a look that it could stop a sundial, you know? I mean, that was just like, it would kill you, you know? I mean, and musicians must have gotten that all the time. And like, you know, a couple times I saw it, it scared me, you know? But he was many, we all are. I mean, don't you think there are like 93 parts of Eloy? You know, I mean, like you're brave and you're a coward.
Yeah. We all have those things, and that's a big part about social media, and even having a show something like this, it's I'm showing one aspect of myself here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And somebody might watch a video and they'll think, well, I know who he is because I watch his videos, but there's other things happening that I don't talk about here that other people know, and I don't talk to them at all about the stuff that I do here. So like
Right. And
it's
90% of your life may be elsewhere. And that doesn't mean this isn't important. It's just
right.
and Prince had so many compartments.
Yeah.
And we all compartmentalize, like how we have like friends who we don't mix, or we fit people in. But I never saw someone so compartmentalized. And I hate to say it breaks my heart, but he was the loneliest person I ever met, and I don't think it's his fault, and I don't think it's just his circumstances were terrible growing up,
Well, so here's something that I proposed in a video earlier, years and years ago. Whenever I hear somebody say that, he was a very lonely person, I always think of, because I actually do know people who prefer to be alone.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is there a difference, or is that projection, like if you see somebody sitting alone, we as people who maybe are more social, we're like, man, wouldn't you rather be hanging out with people? But maybe he preferred to be alone.
I don't know. I think it's a great question, but it's a mixed bag. And it's, when I first got to know when I was young, after Purple Rain, and he showed me the field where where Paisley Park was going to be built. Mm-hmm. And I immediately thought, bam, I thought of Citizen Kane, the movie, and mm-hmm. Charles Foster Kane living in Xanadu. And I swear to God, it's like, I'm not this Trekkie. I'm not going Trekkie, as I said, he's going to die in there alone. And indeed, he showed me at Sonny Liston's grave. He told me it's one fear. And this may have been his only fear, was of dying alone.
Wow.
At the same time, when I asked him in 1985, and he said I said, what is Paisley Park?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you? And he said, it's the place where you can go to be alone, and so he'd use it alone and lonely in different ways. And I think he escaped into the studio so he didn't have to deal with people. He didn't like a whole lot of people. And I'm not saying that as like, but hey, you like me, because I don't know. You talk to him every once a week for 2 months, and then you wouldn't talk to him for a year. So that's not how like my friendships work, and
I will say though, that I think for me, that particular point, because there's a lot of people who kind of think the same way, right? Like your friends are the people that you talk to all the time and you hang out with, and stuff like that. But I have friends, and this isn't even me trying to be lonely or anything, but I have friends that I won't talk to them for years, but as soon as we pick up the phone, it's like old times.
Yeah. And there are other people who you can like not see for like a weekend, and like 5 minutes of conversation is hell,
Exactly.
It's God, I wish there was a name for that, where but he craved being alone.
Yeah.
And like in the first interviews I did, he said, Susanna Melvoin said, when he's over at your house, should I come over with some people so it looks like you have people coming over all the time? And he said, no, that would be a lie, because we don't. That's not, even as band people didn't come over that often, and And so he realizes he needed to be alone. And he said a lot of it came from his father too. He said he now understood why his father was such a, or he said when he was feeling good about his father, why he was such a jerk growing up. He said that when you're writing music, you know, your heartbeats, if someone else is there, their heartbeat just changes things, and it does, you know. And he said that's why it was so hard for his father to live with anybody, you know. And that why it was hard for Prince to live with anybody. But it's weird because he like repeated the same pattern as his father, his grandfather, you know. And I just wish he was still here, you know. And it makes me sad when like I learned so much after he died about him. It's like, do you ever not know someone, then they die and you hear all about them, and it's like you get to know them after they've passed away. And in so many ways I feel that, and I wish I had been a better friend, and I wish I was a genius, because he deserves a genius to write a book about him. You know, it's like if you're writing a biography memoir of a genius and you're not one, you know you're going to fail ultimately in some critical way, and all you can do is the best you can. And I had to. And I remember this thing he said when he always had these all different, I always tried to every 5 years get his definition of what was cool, you know. And it was so interesting what he said, 25, at 30, at 35, you know. And at 25 was all the way he looked, you know. And but by the end he was talking about death, and he said he was just talking about the Black Album. And there have been so many stories that have been accepted as truth, you know. Believe him, don't believe him, enjoy yourself, you know. But it's he said he thought it was just a really ugly record, you know. And if he said you're going to be remembered by the last thing you do before you die, so you better. I didn't want that ugly thing to be the last thing. And I've tried. I mean, I'm of a certain age now. It's like I don't want to do track, you know. It's like it seemed worth it though to do it for a friend, you know. Like this may not have worked and this may not have worked, but at least I tried, you know. But already there, you know, people have been so nice in the Prince community, and I've been like, I count myself a member, and I'm at those, you know. I go to some things, and not really. I mean, from afar, I see, and people have been so nice. But once in a while, you'll see some hater go, "That con man, Neal Karlen," you know. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't write about him for 26 years. I didn't put a book proposal in for 6 months. I like,
I mean, a lot of people, it's the same thing. I think we all get it. Anybody who puts themselves in any kind of position, we all get it. You know, like for me, because I didn't start my channel before he died, I'm an opportunist, you know, and all that, just making money off of his name. And it's like, okay, I didn't make a channel before he died because I didn't have a reason to. The reason I made the channel was to kind of mourn his death. So, I mean, that's how that works. No need for it before. But you know, going back to my point about, you know, friends that don't talk for a while, but they're still friends. And I don't want to spoil it here or anything, but when I read the account of the last phone call with Prince, like you earlier in the book had said, I'm not even sure if I was Prince's friend, you know, if we were really friends. But then I read that conversation that you had with him, and I was just like, he obviously regarded you as a friend, because that's not a conversation that you have with somebody.
Yeah. And I don't know, why didn't I understand that? I mean, what an idiot. I mean, it's like, I don't go, how puzzling. It's just, I'm mad at myself because I never sort of told him like, hey, friend, Pally, you know, and we weren't, I mean, it wasn't like that. I mean, he was Prince, but the feelings of sort of like guilt, because I knew he was in trouble the last few weeks. His old friends did, but they couldn't get through to him. You know, he had sort of surrounded himself with a new cast of people. And so there's a little guilt, but also it's like, I feel okay about this, whether it sells 1 billion copies or none. By the way, you can order it out.
I'll have links to the book in the description so that everybody can go.
Yeah, that isn't even the most important, you know, because, you know, I want this, at least it'll be a book people can go, I don't know if it's creative or not, but it's true. And the quotes are like, come from, I mean, the audiobook, it's good that they'll have the audio of him talking like a human being with me. So you can go like, oh, he is a human being. I mean, people are freaked out who've heard that so far, because it's just.
I think that's part of it too. Is I even just recently I had somebody in
I think I said to yeah.
You did. So I just recently had somebody in a comment say exactly the thing that you were just saying. You know, he's a fraud, he's a con man, and why should we believe what he says over what other people say? And, you know, the real answer to that is because you have recordings, and a lot of the stuff in the book is verbatim what was said between the two of you and what actually happened. So even though there's only 25 minutes of, say, tape that's going to be in the audio book, how much actual tape did you have to like scour through?
Lots and lots, but then I had a fire in the middle. That's this whole drama. That burned. That's why in the book they show one letter he wrote, burned, like perfectly crispified. So I have several hours of tape, but they're just putting in, like, I'm reading the book, and then they'll have him like come in and say a little thing, you know. So we're recording that this week, and but I hope, I mean, I hope it does good, just because. But that I'm a con man, it's like, this is not how I would have been more ambitious. I wouldn't have, you know, I would have had a book proposal out the next day, not 4 months later. I would, you know.
No.
Thank God it's only a little tiny percentage of the.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's the thing, is honestly.
But that's what sticks. That's what hits you. Yeah.
Prince spoke about love. Prince was all about like caring for one another. And I will say 99% of the Prince community is exactly that.
Yeah.
So it's really just that 1% that we have to look out for. But literally, like, if I go places, I get 100% love usually.
Yeah.
You know, it's an amazing thing to be part of a community like this. But also, I've been doing a lot of the same as what you did. Like, I've been trying to read as many books as I could and try to just learn as much as I can about Prince from all of these different perspectives. Again, like, because he would tell different stories to different people. And like, I feel that yours is definitely a worthwhile addition to a collection of books that I think all together start to really paint a picture of who Prince was.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it was like a segment, an important segment, I thought.
Yeah.
Was missing. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that the human person who he was. Yeah. And if it's through my lens, and my lens isn't your lens.
Right.
So, but it's what I saw, and you just don't want to do crap work. You know what I mean? Like, if you really like, we're doing bad, you know, I don't want to feel like, well, that was a wasted 4 years of my life when I'm.
Trust me. I'm a writer as well. I don't write biographies, but you know, the things that I write, and I spend a lot of time trying to make sure it doesn't suck.
Right. Right. Just that, the minimum, you know, it's like
just the minimum. Like, it doesn't even have to be good. I just don't want it to just be a garbage pile, you know? It's like,
and the road to Suckville is very short, you know, and
it very much is.
And there's multiple ramps leading to it.
So honestly, I mean, thank you so much for being here, like, Neal. It's been an amazing time actually coming back and talking with you again for long. I mean, and actually, like, our last conversation was maybe 20 minutes that I edited down to like just over 10. So it was
people rushing around. And
so it was really good to actually just be able to sit around and just kind of, you know, BS and hear more about your book and just kind of talk in general. So,
and you know what's fun about talking about the book is I haven't like repeated things. I've only done a couple interviews. So it's like, I'm not just like saying what I said. And I don't want to go out into that real world of like book reviewers where you have to, like, you understand Prince, whatever it is about him, for you, it works. Everybody has different reasons. So
exactly,
it's like, it's nice to be in that world, you know?
Yeah. But I am going to be putting a link. So if any of you are interested in picking out the book, this thing called Life, on and off, Prince, on and off the record, definitely go pick it up. It's going to be a link in the description. And eventually, when I'm done reading it, and I probably should be able to finish it this week, but I will be doing a review of it. I don't know if there's like a date I'm supposed to like not talk about stuff or not, since it's on pre-order. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to square all that away.
You and your God will have to come to an agreement.
But I did get an early draft, and I thank you for that, Neal. But I will definitely be doing a review of it as soon as I am allowed to do one. So I will definitely be doing that. Otherwise, are you going to be doing any signings, any book readings, anything that?
Yeah, they're trying to figure that out. Like it's now in the, there aren't like readings as such,
Yeah, I guess
a book launch, and I'm doing like Zoom stuff, and and Prince groups are really good, but once the book starts, I'll be, again, I'm, and Rolling Stone will hopefully set off a lot of, they're trying to get it on mainstream places.
Yeah. If people want to be up on the news, like the up to date with you, where do they go?
There'll be a Facebook page, which will be called like This Thing Called Life by me, Neal Karlen.
Okay, so I'll make sure to put a link to the Facebook page. And
that'll go up in like the next day if it hasn't already.
All right, awesome then. Well, I appreciate you coming on to our show.
Hey, I appreciate you asking
about it. I mean, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise, for your words, for sharing recordings and a different side of Prince than I think any of us have ever actually.
Yeah, any time. And I just hope anyone who disagrees with me, you're probably right. I mean, he was a many layered guy, so I am probably being a jerk about that, but probably, but I may not be. So,
might not be, but yeah.
Don't hate the player, hate the game,
Exactly. And if you want to not hate the player and only hate the game, on more of Prince's Friends videos, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, all that good jazz. And may you live to see the dawn. Love you all. Thank you again to Neal.
Thank you. See you.